Hello everyone, welcome to the stream. This is episode 2 of Riffing with Scott. Alright, so tonight we're going to be looking at Severomance. This is a pretty gnarly tune. Lots of really weird rhythmic stuff going on. We were initially inspired by Car Bomb for this one. A lot of the riffage is very angular and distorted. So, alright, let me get a few things going here. So, can everyone hear me nice and clearly? I'm going to be running things a little differently tonight. Instead, I'm going to be running everything into Pro Tools. So hopefully we won't get any of that playback delay that we had an issue with last week. Okay, so let me know if you guys can hear this. Is everyone able to hear the music? All right. And what about the guitar? Is the guitar nice and clear as well? All right, cool. Hopefully there won't be as many or any delay issues this time. So what we're going to do is I'm going to play through the tune to start off with. Forgive me, I've been practicing a lot and I've got a really nasty blister on my finger. So if the solo is a bit trash, then I'm sorry in advance because my fingers are busted, but I'll do my best anyway. Alright, so I'm going to play through Severomance and then we're going to pull it apart piece by piece. And of course, if you guys have any questions, the whole point in having the chat there is to drop some questions or to talk. So please, by all means, just put whatever you like in there and we'll get chatting about things. All right, here's Severomance. Mic was off. Go me. I'm doing a great job on this stream so far. So I foolishly didn't have my own send on. So I'm going to try that all again. So let's just forget that ever happened. Never ever should have known. So that is Severomance. Sorry about the solo; it was a bit scratchy. Yeah, I've got this really nasty blister on my finger from trying to do Petrucci solos for hours on end, and it's really messed with my fingers. Cool. So let me just pull up. Let's pause Pro Tools for a moment, and let's pull up the tab. Okay, so the first part, I'm playing all of the clean ambient guitars on the top. You get this really nice kind of shimmery, clean delay type effect, which sounds kind of like this. The way that I get this effect is I'm using parallel delay and reverb on the patch. So I've got one line that just has a reverb on it and one line that has both a delay and a reverb on it. The delay itself, give me a sec, is just a vintage digital. So it has a bit of that sort of rolled off decay, like it's not, you don't get that real bright bounce from the delay. So the idea is you want that to be nice and long and trailed out, and the reverb just acts to kind of soften the bounce. So you don't hear the note kind of bounce back constantly. You kind of hear it almost sort of turn into this big swirl. That's kind of the idea. There's a little bit of that bounce, but it's not sort of like this doom 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 kind of effect. You don't get the clear bounces from it. It's sort of washed away a little bit. So that's the clean sound, and as you can see, these are the chords that I'm playing up here. Simone's part, I suck at. It's really difficult. The part that Simone is playing is this really angular. Now, if you're into your hybrid picking, then you can also hybrid pick this. So you can use your middle finger to pluck the octave or the 7 here and here. So if that's what you prefer to do, then that's cool too. It's a really nasty little riff there. It doesn't seem like, it seems kind of innocuous, but at a tempo like 165, getting those 16ths to really pop and be tight is very difficult. So you want to practice all your string skipping here if you can, because otherwise, hot tip, back off the volume knob for that riff. Yes, thank you, Simone. That's a good point too. Yeah, Simone is currently in the chat, and she'll be kind of just dropping little bits of nuggety wisdom in there for everyone. So yeah. So it's a tricky one. It's one that you have to be really careful not to let get sloppy. You have to actually be really dedicated to making sure you're nailing that rhythm. Otherwise, it starts to sound pretty messy. So that's all that's really happening in this section for Simone and I. I get to play all the fun, shimmery delay stuff, which is nice and pretty, and Simone gets to do all the hard work. It's really hard to get that nice and tight and at tempo. So yeah, take that slowly. Cool. The pre-chorus is the next section, and this is just a bunch of octaves. So if you tuned in last week, you'll know that we are use a lot of octaves in our songs. So this song is no different. The whole pre-chorus section is just a big etc. So it's really just these big octaves, and then Simone's doing the same thing but down the octave. Or etc. So it's all these big octave parts. This whole song is drop A, by the way. So this is your B standard on a 7-string with a low A. And yeah, so that's how we get these big fat octave sounds without having to do too much stretching. Like we get 3 octaves of A when we're playing an A. And it's really nice, especially in that really bendy, swanky bit, where we get to play all three A's together. So it sounds pretty wicked. Cool. Okay, so in the chorus, this part here is just big old drone. Now here we have deliberately decided to go real dirty and play, one guitar is playing the flat 9 of A, and then the octave, while the other guitar is playing the octave, and then the major 7. So you get this real dank, like, that kind of sound when put in unison. So it's pretty nasty. It's just basically you're creating minor seconds. Yeah, because we figured that this song wasn't dank enough. Pretty sure Devin's a prolific octaves user too. Yeah, he is. Yeah, there's something really nice about the octave sound. It thickens something without having to add any more harmonic information, and it's just a nice open sound. I don't know. There's something about the way the harmonics stack that just makes it sound really open and clear. You know. So you get this really big, thick, fat sound, but it's yeah, it sounds nice and wide and open as well. It's very cool. Okay, so verse 2 gets a little interesting. So this is actually there are 3 guitar parts going on here, and a little bit of studio trickery to make it sound really kind of like messed up. So one guitar is just playing half notes the whole time. It's just going 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So I guess at tempo it'd be. And that's all that's really going on. But the other guitar is doing this over. I should really pop on a metronome for this. It's playing dotted 8th notes. So, ooh, someone's playing music really loudly. I'm not sure if you guys can hear that. Maybe not. Yeah, you get this really weird bounce effect where you have the left guitar is playing half notes and the right guitar is playing dotted quarters. So they kind of bounce off of each other. Maybe I'll just play the track so you can get an idea.
So it's time to sever always more than whatever really wasn't yours. I'm scoring and every time I write it for.
Right, so you get this left-right bounce effect by having 2 completely different rhythms operating and sort of messing with where your sense of the beat is. And as a result, yeah, you get this really cool kind of panned, trippy guitar effect. You can actually kind of see how the notes line up in the score as well. So the first two notes line up, then the dotted eighth comes first, then the half note, then the other dotted eighth, then half note, dotted eighth, and then at the end, these two notes again align. But they align at the end of a 2-bar sequence. So it continues to kind of displace until you get to the 3rd bar where it repeats again. So you get this weird 3-bar loop where the two rhythms come back into sync with each other. So yeah, it creates a really cool, trippy kind of side-by-side effect. But the other thing you get in this section is sort of a clean guitar from the first verse, but kind of extended. So yeah, you get this really cool shimmery guitar over the top to make it really atmospheric. It took us a long time to work out what to do with this verse because we didn't want to do the same thing as we did in the first verse either. We wanted something to break it up a bit, and we actually, again, had the same issue with the second pre-chorus. We wanted the second pre-chorus to be relatively similar, but we wanted to play with some kind of element to break it apart from the first pre-chorus, because otherwise it feels a little repetitive. So in the second pre-chorus, we decided to just play around with the rhythm instead. We just changed the rhythm to match something that kind of resembled like hits. So it's really just a hit section, fairly straightforward. The only part that really kind of fully connects with the drums right, is just that part there, just this bit in here. And then Simone is playing a lead over the top. I'm not going to bother playing that because I don't know how to. I mean, the tabs are here. But she is following the vocal line. So yeah, she's just doubling up on the vocal. And this is something that we do quite often as well. When we don't want a rhythm guitar part to be as forward in a section, we'll deliberately only give one of the guitarists, the rhythm. If we want the rhythm to be nice and thick and fat and wide, then we'll give both guitars the rhythm section. But in this case, we wanted something a little different, so we pulled one of the guitars away from playing rhythm and doing a little bit of lead to back up the vocal line. So yeah, this is something we do compositionally quite often. I have a question regarding the mix. Is it intentional that Severomance has a bigger sounding mix with more emphasis on the low end? I personally like the sound of Severomance a little better, as it to me sounds a bit more high end as well. It is especially audible during the verses. Good question, Johannes. I would say that there probably was some intention behind making the bottom end a little broader and bigger in this tune, because that was actually me. I play the low octave riff. What was this? What's this, Simone? Please clarify. Yeah, I think Matt Templeman's the guy who has mixed the last 3 records. So he mixed V, Ghost Mile, and Colors in the Sun. He's a really good friend of mine. We've been friends for half our lives, which is pretty crazy to say. He's a phenomenal mix engineer, as you guys are probably aware by how good these albums sound. So he puts in a lot of his own creative flair into the mix work as well. So he'll kind of decide based on what the song needs to mix it a particular way. So every song is catered to a little differently from his perspective. Now, I can't say for sure exactly what he did on those mixes, because I'm not a mix engineer. I absolutely suck at mixing, and the stuff that he does is like pure wizardry to me. So I don't know all of the ins and outs, but I do recall with this one we wanted something that was thicker and broader and darker sounding than some of the other stuff on the record, because I think this song in particular is a lot darker than most of the record. A lot of the record is very upbeat and kind of poppy and synthy, and this one in particular, we really wanted the guitars and some of the more bass-heavy sounds to really dominate this track, and so I think Temp went into it knowing that that's kind of what we wanted, and he sort of worked out that's what the song needed as well. So it's a little bit of us saying, we're feeling this, and then Temp going, yeah, I can kind of facilitate that, and then working out how to make it work from both ends. Because sometimes we might demand something in the mix that we can't get. You know, like everyone wants to be able to hear themselves with absolute clarity, but of course something needs to give somewhere in the mix. A lot of the times the synths have to be cut pretty severely in order for the guitars to pop through, because they sort of occupy the same frequency spectrum. It's a lot of mid-range in the keys as well as the guitars. So you need to kind of prioritize you need to prioritize the instruments in terms of what is more important for a particular section. There's a lot that goes into that. It's a good question, Johannes. I hope that's somewhat informative. Yeah, it's difficult because I obviously wasn't there while Temp mixed absolutely everything. We sort of just would get a mix back and decide whether we like it or not. So, yeah, maybe he can pop in for one of these sessions at some point and maybe answer some more questions in better detail than what I can do. I love the album. Wonderful work. Thank you so much. A polite chap too. It was definitely a darker sound, definitely darker sounding than other tracks in the album. So job done. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it was pretty obvious with this track in particular that we were kind of going for a much moodier and more melancholic kind of sound, more akin to something off Ghost Mile. This was one of the first tracks we had for the album as well. So perhaps you can hear more of that Ghost Mile-y kind of mood and vibe on this track in particular. Okay, so then after this whole pre-chorus, which is essentially the same as the previous one, we go into another chorus. Now, Simone said I play the lead, and I actually didn't know that. Really? I play the lead? I guess I should probably learn to practice my own parts then. Oops. I've been playing the rhythm section the whole time. So yeah, I'll get to practicing that lead. I don't remember doing that, but here we are. Okay, so chorus number 2 is a little different. The first chorus pedals on that A minor the whole time. Right? The second chorus, we wanted to build on that idea, and obviously with Ash's drums kind of picking up the pace rather than going for that full, like, just hit section, we wanted to expand the harmony that was going on. So there's a really cool thing that happens in this chorus where we continue to play A and chords that use notes of A minor. This is in particular for you modal nerds out there. This is A Aeolian. So we've got a flat 6 in there. So we're playing notes of A Aeolian the whole time, but the bass actually moves to the 4. So the bass actually moves to, what would that be? That'd be a D. So the bass moves to a D, but we maintain our A minor chord. Now, here you can see this horrendous stack of notes. Simone and I are splitting chords up again, and this is something that I talked about last week, where because we've got 2 guitarists and because of the limitation of guitar only having 7 notes at an absolute maximum, it's really cool to take those big chords and split them up so that you're playing different notes and representing a different part of the voicing. So my chord starts off as an octave, then I add the flat 6, right? And then I add another flat 6 up the octave. So you get this really nasty kind of like minor 13. So you got 1, 1, flat 6, 1, flat 7, flat 6, and 5. And because of this flat 6 and 5, you get this really nasty dissonance, but in the context of the chord, it sounds quite cool. Because of the way it's stacked, you don't necessarily hear the 5 all that much. Right? And Simone's chord... So when you've got these two different chord voicings, pan left and right, again, it gives you this big, broad, wide sound that's not like necessarily perfectly parallel on either side, which can kind of really thicken things up and make it sound even moodier and darker. So what I really wanted was for the beginning of this chorus to sound really unison, and then as it sort of gets to that build, the guitars sort of split and open up and then kind of close again. So it kind of gives you this idea that things are blooming and then sort of coming back down to being heavy again. So you get these two big chords that open things up, open, and then straight back to octaves. So it kind of gives you that sense of like expanding and contracting, I guess, if you want to talk about it in those kinds of terms. So yeah, after that, we have a sweet triplet drum fill from Ash, and we go into this sort of, I guess, breakdown section, or doom metal section. So Simone's telling me that I even recorded the lead line. My God, I mean, it's been over a year now since we tracked this record, and we recorded the guitars for this album in 4 days, and there is a lot of guitar in this record. A lot of guitar. And of course, you have to double track most parts as well. So it was a stressful time. We also had really strict time limitations on getting the record done, which was incredibly stressful. But it was good. It kind of, put a fire up our ass and forced us to get things done. Cool. Thank you for the great answer. It makes total sense regarding the darker sound. It sounds a bit more like Ghost Mile than the rest. Yeah, cool. It's interesting noticing how you have certain songs that act as sort of like a bridge between previous record and new record. And I feel like this track in particular is one of those, because it is a lot darker and more Ghost Miley. And shot a video clip in 45 degrees. Yes, that is very true. We shot Bright Star around this time last year. I think it was in March or something. And that was brutal as well. That was absolutely heinous. All right, so one thing about these tabs, they will be available eventually. We'll be selling the PDF online, and if there's enough demand, if you guys kick up enough noise about it, we'll also print a physical version as well. What we're gonna do, what we do here is we alternate half bends up and down on fretted notes. So rather than me writing bend up, bend down, bend up, bend down, etc., and making the tablature look really cluttered and messy, I figured it was just easier to write a note to just alternate between bending up and then bending back down for each hit in this section. I mean, the thing about learning in a modern context is you almost always have the audio as a reference. I mean, like, most people want to learn how to play a song because they've already heard it. And now that we have access to everything so much, we have like Spotify and everything in digital media, it's really easy to get a hold of music, It's even easier to transcribe as well. Back in the day, people used to transcribe vinyls by picking up the needle and listening to the same bit of a song over and over again to get it right. But now with access to, digital replicas of everything, it means that you're always going to be using the audio as a reference for learning at all times, which is great. So that frees up publishers and people who write tabs to kind of cut corners where you know, having to write each ornamentation in there is no longer necessary. I can just write a generic message to say alternate half bends up and down on fretted notes, and everyone will get the picture. Everyone will understand what that is because they can hear it. So this section, I'm basically just taking that A octave and just alternating a bend up and then down. Now this whole section is supposed to be really dank. So you're not looking for perfect half-tone bends. You're not even looking to bend both notes like at the same rate. If they don't quite match up, that's fine. The whole point is they're supposed to be a massive and gnarly sounding drone. The thing that's going to keep the whole thing centered is that low A. So the whole time, that low A is there while we're bending these two notes above it. So that's kind of like the ears will tune into this being our home base, and then you'll hear and then we have this really nasty minor 7, I guess. Oh no, it's just a minor triad inversion. So that there is just this chord here, and it's just a minor triad. So yeah, it's just a minor. It's not even an inversion, it's just putting the flat 3 on the top. So it's 1 5 flat 3 rather than 1 flat 3 5. So you get this. And what's really important is this little gap here. This rest is where that big fuck off snare lands. So we deliberately don't play anything here to let that snare just go wham on its own. So that was something that we did intentionally because we wanted that snare to be the sort of punch in the face to make the whole thing jump into the riff again. So you get this sort of if you can use silence to make the impact of a new note really intense. So that's a really effective thing that you can do with composition, is to basically use really terraced dynamics where you go from like silence to being smacked in the face again musically. So this is a weird section too because we have sort of like a 5-bar phrase, 1 2 3 4 5, and then it starts again 1 2 3 4. So this whole section we kind of mess around with the time a little bit. So it's not a time signature change, but it's just a phrasing change. So you've got sort of like 20 quarter notes and then your regular 16 quarter notes for the second half. Same deal here, 1 2 3 4 5, and then 1 2 3 4. And then we have the whole ending section. I get to mentally prepare to play a solo. I'm not much of a lead player. I consider myself much more of a rhythm player. So every time a solo comes up, I kind of sweat a lot and freak out. So yeah, I can't say I love playing solos all that much, but the point is that when a song requires you to play a solo, you play the damn solo. You make the solo work. So this song really needed a solo, and it needed something that had like some sort of crazy entry. So yeah, we'll get to that. So Simone just plays the same rhythm that is played in the verse, and this is in a different key. This is now in, this would be D minor, this whole section. I think something like that, and then it goes up a fourth anyway. So this is just that same rhythm throughout the whole section. That's pretty straightforward, and then we have the solo, which I'll try and go through slowly. One thing that I like to mention when learning solos, and this is something that I'm working on at the moment. I'm trying to learn Under a Glass Moon by Dream Theater, and that solo is a complete and utter nightmare. Hey Zach, how you doing? One thing that's really important about learning solos is to learn. I call it learning vertically, where essentially you want to master each phrase or each chunk of information. Like, I feel it's much more efficient use of time when you're practicing or learning something to make sure that you're nailing every phrase first. So learn the first phrase and practice that over and over and over and over again until it becomes muscle memory. Then move on to the next phrase. If you need to break up a phrase in certain ways in order to get an even finer tooth comb through the section, then just find like places that it makes sense to break the phrase up. So like this first one. Yeah, that blister is messing me up real bad. So this is the legato stuff that I like to do. I'm not much of a shredder. I'm working on that, but my alternate picking and coordinations is honestly not that good. So here I'm basically relying on my legato playing to get me through this phrase at tempo. And that's basically it. So you've got, in terms of your finger position, you're starting with pointer. You're basically doing this whole run using pointer, middle, and ring, and it's all 2 frets apart the whole time. There's a couple of slides that happen here. So the first 4 notes, you slide the 12th to the 13th. Right, so that gets you into position. So you can have your hand in the same shape, and it should all slot under the hand pretty comfortably. Right? From there, so by the way, this is a run up Lydian. So this is a Lydian run. So there, I'm now sliding up to 19th fret with my ring finger. That puts me into position for the next 3 notes. Right? And I'm only playing 3 notes on this string before moving on. Alright? Oh. Kind of like that. So if you need to take that phrase really slowly and just look at each string on its own in a vacuum. It should all slot under the fingers pretty easily. Hey Matt, how you doing? Zach, yes, I am going to do the album in order because, you know, that's prog or something. Or logical, I should say. Okay, so then you've got a half bend at 21. This little phrase we kind of mess around with a little bit in terms of timing. So I'm doing like a backslide there. Right? And then you've got this, which is a pretty, this whole shape is something that is in a lot of lead playing. It's sort of like a classic lick, one that I stole off Michael Ackerfeld. He uses that quite a bit. It's a really nice sounding melodic kind of lick. It's kind of arpeggiated, but it's a little bit scalar too. It's nice. So this puts me squarely on the D minor. Now the difficult thing here is trying to make sure that all those syncopations are really nicely phrased and in time. And there's a couple of string skips in here as well, which are a little bit tricky. Okay, so there's that bit. It's actually really hard to pull the solo apart phrase by phrase because I'm so used to playing it all in one go. So apologies if I'm stuffing things up. So this is a really weird little phrase that I kind of had to change around. I may have missed a pull-off here. Yeah, okay. So, apologies. Here, there is a little tiny pull-off. So it really should go. Bit of a weird one. Right? Oh god. Really hard to play this stuff slowly. So it's just kind of doing a sort of playing between two strings and then using a slide each time. So there is that same sort of thing. So it's that same kind of shape that I'm using twice there. So yeah, this is really Simone's right. It's hard to play slow. It's really hard to pull it apart. I think that's the part that I'm having the most trouble with. Then there's a really wide slide. So, so there's that pre-bend. Now you have an eighth note before that to kind of catch it, so that's good. Now, here's a cool little thing that a good friend of mine, John Overthrow, who is a fantastic guitarist, showed me that I never thought of doing, which is to bend a note and then do... I'm very used to doing stuff like this, right? Where you sort of hit a note, trill it forward and trill it back. But John does this really cool thing where he bends the note before and then does the slide, which is sick. Again, apologies for the bends and stuff. They sound horrible because my finger is killing me. You get this really kind of like out of control, almost like quarter tony kind of sound when you put the two together, where you bend and then do the little trill. Oh, God, that hurts. So, so there it is. And then I do it again. And there's that same thing where I'm kind of using alternating strings and sliding in order to get up to a high note. Yeah. It's a tricky one. It's a tricky one to pull apart. I could spend a lot more time talking about it, but I won't. For the time being, hopefully there's enough there in terms of video content that you guys can go back and learn how to play it yourself with as much as I've kind of pulled that apart. I hope. I enjoy lead playing a lot, but but more so for improvisation. When it comes to writing a solo, I have commitment problems. Ben, yeah, this is totally a thing with writing solos. It's difficult. It's really difficult. I find you've got this blank canvas to do whatever the hell you like, and sometimes you can get option paralysis, and sometimes you're like, oh, is this lick like good enough? Should I be doing something better? One thing I find really helps is having a good idea of how you want to start and end a solo. So you want a good idea as to like you really need to ask yourself like what's the solo supposed to be doing? What's the intent? Is the solo supposed to start off like, just rip into it with a big shred, or is it sort of something that kind of comes in subtly? Is it something that is supposed to maintain the energy that it comes in at and build, or is it supposed to maintain the energy and drop? Like, it's really about asking yourself what the solo is actually doing for the song. I think that's really an important part of it, and that'll dictate what your first idea is. That'll give you a really good idea as to where to start with the solo. Um, Endings are also good, and you can ask the same question: what's coming after the solo? Like, where's it going? Is it going into another chorus? Is it, you know? I actually did a transcription of the sax solo from Never Tear Us Apart by In Excess, because it's actually a really clever solo. It's really straightforward. It's really simple, but it starts off with like a bluesy lick, and it comes in and like it just smacks you. It's like that cool ripping like sax solo that's really sexy and whatnot. And then so you've got this first little lick that's really bluesy, and then it sort of mellows out into a really melodic line at the end of the solo because it's going into the chorus, and the chorus is like the most melodic part of that tune. So you've got this real clear indicator as to what the solo is trying to pull you into. So if you go into writing a solo knowing what the first lick is and what you want, how you want it to start, and how it's going to end, filling it out with extra stuff in the center is a lot easier. It kind of gives you a blueprint to work with, and will hopefully kind of fill some of that space for you. That's an extremely sexy sax solo. Yeah, you're right. It is. It's very good. I think you underestimate your soloing. I think with hyperventilating solo, you and Simone pull off the finest solos I've ever heard. And I'm old. Man, thanks, Steve. Yeah, look, I mean, if I thought I was good enough already, then I wouldn't have any reason to practice. I wouldn't feel motivated to practice. But in reality, there's always something to work on. For me, it's alternate picking. Like, I absolutely suck at that stuff. Like, I'll definitely take pride in saying that I don't think my solos are very like super conventional in a lot of respects, because I never really learnt other people's solos apart from like Michael Ackerfeld. Soloing really never interested me, to be honest, growing up. And of course, I'm a bass player primarily. I started on bass and moved to guitar later on, so I have a very fundamental attitude when it comes to stuff. I tend not to think about the lead line so much. I tend to think about layering and composition more so than anything else. So I think my approach to soloing is really motivated and influenced by that. But in terms of like actual chops and licks and stuff, I mean, I can't sweep pick. I can't like play fast tremolos or anything like that. I'm not a conventional shredder by those standards. I just really like legato. I think it sounds good. My favorite Voyager solo is probably between Lifeline and Disconnected. Oh, cool. Lifeline is really fun. Simone's solo in that is absolutely nuts. Absolutely nuts. And yeah, I agree with Disconnected. Simone's solo on Disconnected is sick too. I love that. Scott is my fresh inspo when I hit that brick wall. Simone inspires me as well. She plays guitar in ways that I don't, which I think is really cool. I think that's why Simone and I work really well together, because we're not necessarily we're not always trying to say the same things, and as a result, we get a cool back and forth creatively. If we were both always wanting to say the same things, then I think it would be kind of boring. But I think that those two things complement each other. Like, me and Simone are very similar people, and have very similar opinions on things, especially when it comes to creativity. But because we are two different people, we'll always be processing through our own filters. Like Simone spent a lot more time studying guitar than I did, so she has a lot more of that like guitar knowledge that I don't have. And so a lot of her lead playing is grounded on uh, studying more lead players. Like she's listened to more Satriani and Vi than I have, all that kind of stuff. It's pretty amazing how much of that stuff filters into what you do creatively. Why is your finger blistered? Because I've been trying to play Under a Glass Moon, and that solo is ridiculous. I don't actually comprehend how fingers can move that fast. I've just picked up guitar again for ISO fun after about a decade. Nice. And stuff like this is so great to watch. Thank you so much for doing this. You're welcome, Sarah. That's cool. I work as a teacher, a guitar teacher, so this is how I make my money. So yeah, if anything helps, then that's my job done. Like I'm stoked on that. That's cool. Keep practicing. It's like being back in school music class and making me feel guilty my guitar hasn't been out of its case in a while. Hey, like, you'll pick it up when you want to. It's all good. So I'm getting far behind on these comments. I always like to treat a solo like a song within a song that complements the song. Yeah, absolutely, Steve. Yeah, I think you can kind of tell when a solo's just been thrown in for the sake of it versus a solo that feels like it has its place in a song. Of course, that's subjective, but I think you can make the argument that certain songs that have solos maybe don't need them as much as others do. Like there are times where you're like, man, a solo would be sweet here, and then it just pops in right at the exact moment you wanted it, and it's like sweet. So yeah, solos should complement the song, and the solo should reference the song in some way, or try to give the song a sense of direction. In other words, you don't want to play a bunch of mindless licks. You want it to go somewhere. You want it to have a sense that it's taking you to the next spot. You don't want to just sort of ruminate on a bunch of ideas. This is why I actually love the Glass Moon solo so much, because it really pulls you through into something that's exciting. And then by the end of it, it goes into that massive shred, and then it goes into a keyboard solo and stuff like that. So prog. But the point is that the solo is phrased really well, and it pulls you, it takes you on a journey. You don't want to just hear a bunch of blues licks played mindlessly. You want it to take you somewhere. Lifeline may be my all-time favorite solo. Well, there's actually that song is split up into two solos. So the first half is me, and then it moves over to Simone in the second half, where the riff changes. Simone and I love getting the opportunity to do that because we sort of riff off each other's ideas, and that's always really fun. So that solo was incredibly hard to work out because there was so much open space. Yeah. I don't think anyone can think they're worthy of not practicing. There's always something new to learn. Hard agree. Couldn't agree more. If you want to torture yourself, try to get through all of Frank Gambale's Trop Builder. Yeah, I've heard about his stuff. Yeah. Some really great insight into how guitarists construct solos. No worries, man. I'm glad I can help in some way. I think it's important to think about especially like when it comes to creating music, you want to always think about complementing the song. You always want to work for the song. You don't want to work for yourself. I mean, in that sense, in saying that though, it's nice to write a solo that challenges you as well. So like I deliberately write stuff that is maybe 5 to 10% out of my comfort zone, and then I have to force myself to kind of play it well, which I do hopefully most of the time. So it's nice to take that opportunity to push yourself a little bit, but by the same token, you want something that still makes sense. You want something that compositionally complements what's going on already. So you can kind of get the best of both worlds if you spend enough time working on it. Learning to Fly by Pink Floyd has beautiful solos, and none of them are shredding solos. It just proves that solo isn't all about playing fast, especially if you want good music. I couldn't agree more, man. I think it's horses for courses. Like Pink Floyd and Dave Gilmour. Dave Gilmour is one of those guys that can play one note and you go, yeah, that's exactly what I wanted to hear, and it's played the exact way you want to hear it. Stuff like that is so satisfying to listen to. It's about touch. It's about what you want the note to say, and it's about yeah, giving the note a voice, man. This all sounds so masturbatory, by the way, but there's a difference between playing a note like this and playing a note like this. Like you can do all kinds of stuff to make one thing sound cool, and it's a matter of how you approach playing the note. If you want it to sing, or whether you want it to just sit and be calm, or whatever. It's all in the touch. Guess your guitar lines are in line with the rest of the Voyager players. Each of you cover each other. In my opinion, it wouldn't make sense to have complex solo phrases again in line with the Voyager sound. Yeah, definitely. I think the song always comes first for us, and we want to do things that layer on top of that nicely, if that makes sense. It's not like we don't try to compete with each other. I think that the minute that starts happening, it stops sounding like music to me. So you got to make sure that there's space for everybody. Oh, Steve's, what's up? Sorry, I'm so far behind. I'm like 4 minutes behind on comments. That's a bit of an LSB. Live, Scotty. Bye. Those memes need to come back, but because me and Alex can't see each other because of this isolation thing, we haven't been able to do one. I think prog is good as a genre of telling a story through various instruments, not just vocals. Phrases on different instruments that take a lead to go to the next section is nicer than wittily over-the-top solo for one member to show off. Yeah, agree. I mean, not to be critical of Dream Theater or anything, but I feel like there are definitely points where there are just sort of solos for solo's sake. I've never really been a huge fan of that, but I also understand that there are tons of people that love to see some of the best players in the world playing monstrous stuff. And I can totally see the appeal in that. When I was younger, that was like the thing that made me stoked about listening to Dream Theater, was just like, man, these guys are insane musicians. They're playing some crazy, crazy stuff. But I guess as I get older, I feel like I just want to write songs that are memorable and catchy. Yeah, I don't know. Like, it's what you want to prioritize. Like, I haven't really prioritized lead playing. I've prioritized like songwriting and stuff like that, rather than lots of alternate picking. So I agree. Like, taking the limiter off on the rules of a song structure, definitely my primary draw to the genre. Yeah. I mean, it's cool because you can do so much in this genre. I mean, in my opinion, you can do so much in any genre. I think I think genres generally are pretty silly for the most part, because it's good to have tropes, for a lack of a better word. Tropes sounds a little negative, but like, it's good to have identifiers for certain genres. I think that's cool, but it's much cooler seeing what people can do creatively within or outside of the genre as well. I think that's where all the most interesting stuff happens, is when you take elements of certain styles and mash them together. And you don't really get that by having arguments on the internet about what is or isn't prog. I hate those arguments where people are just like, oh, that's not prog, that's got this in it, or it sounds more like this genre. It's like, it doesn't matter. None of that matters. What matters is the song good? Do you like the song? If you do, great. Like, that's honestly all that matters. On the topic of John Petrucci solos, Under a Glass Moon is definitely up there for all the right reasons, but I feel the Blind Faith unison section is super underrated for how beautiful it is. Blind Faith. I don't know what record that's off, Ben. I'm like a 90s, early 2000s Dream Theater fan, so I can't remember what record Blind Faith is on, or if I've heard it. Ooh. Per Nilsson and Guthrie, shreds with feels. Hard agree, Simone. Per Nilsson is such a freak. So good. So much awesome legato playing as well. Like, he's the kind of guy that I want to sound like, really smooth and just tasty, tasty stuff. I find it really hard to get hugely into Dream Theater. Yeah, I mean, again, if you're into like the musicianship for musicianship's sake, like as in, you know, watching people who are amazing technicians at their instrument play some really complicated stuff, it's no better band. I guess I don't find an appeal in the way that they write songs. I guess it feels like doesn't feel like it has the same pull or sense of direction that I like to hear in music. But again, it's just a personal preference, you know, like it's obviously no knock on them. Those guys are insanely talented and have made a legit money-making career out of playing progressive music. How many bands can do that? There's very, very few that have done that successfully, so props to them. I am not the biggest fan, but boy, are they good live. Yeah, they are very, very good live. Hard agree. It's just, yeah, it's insane watching these people play such complicated music so perfectly. It's unreal. Okay, so to bring it back to the song for just a brief moment, I've talked about the solo enough. I don't want to talk about that anymore. The very end is pretty much the exact same rhythm that's played in the verses, but just as big long chords. So rather than like a stab section, they're big and long, so it sounds really frantic. And all we do is change from an octave to a minor third, and that's basically it. This section we wanted to sound like earlier era Leprous. That's kind of one of the inspirations for this track as well, is Leprous, because man, those guys are amazing. If you haven't gone and listened to Pitfalls yet, just do it. It is so good. So good. It's probably my album of the year, actually, of last year. It was just, man, genius songwriting, and just like so melancholic and beautiful and crushing, and it's got so many different moods. And I think The Sky is Red is probably one of the best prog songs written in the last decade. That's my hot take. My hot take is that it's one of the best prog songs written in the last decade. If only Per finishes Singularity Part 2, his lead playing has seriously got better each album. Yeah, I mean, I haven't actually gone and listened to any of his solo stuff, but all the videos I've seen of him playing online, and now doing a lot of finger picking as well in his lead playing, it's just, it's so good, man. It's so tasty. Hey Luke, how you doing? What's good? Zach and Luke just having their own conversation in chat. Why not? Cool. So, did anyone have any questions about this tune on a more like general level? Just pop any questions in the chat, and then maybe we'll call it a night. I think I love Voyager because I can hear a lot of similar influences to my own mixed in there. So it's like when a bit just clicks. Yeah, that's cool. I think we have all the members of Voyager have a very broad interest in terms of musical influences. Ash is like really into all kinds of interesting 90s alt rock stuff that I've never really been so into. Massive Nine Inch Nails fan, that kind of stuff. Danny's into like all kinds of electronic music, if that wasn't obvious enough. So I'm massively influenced by like Devin Townsend and um, the Deer Hunter at the moment. Simone is like heavily influenced by Vi and Dev as well. Michael Ackerfeld, Opeth, big influence of ours. Catatonia, like there's so much stuff. Alex is like super into all the 80s slap bass stuff, Alain Caron and all that sort of stuff as well. So yeah, there's such a broad palette of influences, which I think help. But it's nice having one element of Voyager that's always present, which is that sort of pop sensibility. Like I feel like we always try to write a catchy song first and then add complexity later. So our rhythms might be complex, but we want the melodies to be memorable. So yeah, that's kind of our general approach. And because we have that overarching philosophy, it's a lot easier to continue to apply that same philosophy with maybe different influences or a different mood underneath it. Whatever. Is gent a dirty word? Nah, I don't care. It is what it is. It's not a genre, it's a timbre. But, everyone knows what you mean when you say gent. If someone's like, they're a gent band, everyone knows what they mean. That's all that matters. If you can communicate what it is that you're trying to describe with words, you have succeeded. So if that happens to be the word gent, so be it. Genital. Diablo Macho, have you checked out Devin's podcast? I have, and it is so good. Infinity was like a life-changing album for me. And what's really interesting is that everything that Dev talks about Infinity, where the whole thing was like a big ego trip, essentially. What's funny about it is, from my point of view, I thought that all of that stuff about oneness and singularity and unity and all this sort of stuff was the opposite. I thought it was a reflection on how he is just a speck of dust in the universe. So it's kind of funny. My interpretation was the exact opposite to what was actually being said on that record. The thing that sort of stuck with me the most was life is all dynamics. That is like a phrase I used to live by. I used to love that concept. Life is all dynamics. Like, it is, you have good days, you have bad days, you have in between days, you have plateaus, but at the end of the day, it's all just this dynamic shift between, you might have a string of bad luck, you might end up, falling in love, you might, whatever. I think it's just a cool way of looking at it. It's very pragmatic. I never got into Devin, respect the hell out of him, but there's something that just doesn't sit with me for whatever reason. I mean, if I'm honest, I'm a big old school Dev nut. Like, I love all the early stuff. Everything up to Syncestra and Alien for me is just that to me is the cream of his career. But again, all this stuff is subjective. I just find that there's something about those earlier records that it feels like every album is a really separate statement, especially when it comes to the composition as well as the mix. Like, I feel like the production of every record is so vastly different that it stands on its own, and that's what I loved about it. I was really drawn by the atmospherics and the fact that I would get really powerful visual stimulus from listening to it, like listening to Ocean Machine. It just I don't know, 3 a.m. and Sister and all of these songs just remind me of being at a beach at sunrise or just before sunrise. You get these massively powerful images just from listening to this music, which is really cool. I don't necessarily get that so much with his new material, but of course, what's cool about listening to those podcasts is you're seeing someone who has gone from being in a really difficult headspace to really being in a much more positive space. And it's cool to see that growth, not only in words but in the music that he creates as well, that there's something more self-aware about the music that he creates as time goes on. I think is really, really awesome. Yeah. So that's Severomance. If you guys want to check out more Voyager stuff, I mean, you're probably all fans anyway. But who knows? There might be some new people here. If so, welcome. If you want more of what we do, you can check out all of the links that are down on that, down in the stream below. The best place to get all of our music is on bandcamp.com. So we've got a Bandcamp link down there as well. Voyager.bandcamp.com. And you can pick up the new record in beautiful vinyl. Look at that. The inside is even more beautiful, but I'm going to leave that to you lucky people who buy them. We've got a couple copies left. All of our music is up there. All of our music is on Spotify, so you can go and check that out. But yes, if you're interested in buying physical merch at a time where we don't have the capacity to gig or do the things that we normally do, support us in whatever way you can. Yeah, we really appreciate all of you. So thank you so much for being with me and being with us and hanging out and talking nonsense. And yeah, I'll see you next week.